So hopefully you're aware of this, but this is the first public meeting for the Richmond Sidewalks scoping study. And let's see, tonight, Eric, you want to skip ahead to the next slide? This is what our agenda looks like. We're going to talk about, introduce the project advisory committee. We'll go through the project area. We'll talk about where we are in the process in terms of this study. And Eric has been doing some existing conditions work, compiling everything. And then most importantly, we want to hear from you about any issues, concerns, and ideas you have with regard to the installation of either sidewalks and or paths in the 3 project areas. And then we'll get to next steps. So I'll start with introductions, then I'll pass it over to Revi. I'm Jason Shrest with the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, Senior Transportation Planning Engineer there. And we are the primary funders of this project with a local match coming from the town. And if you're not familiar with the RPC, there are several of, I think 9 to 11 or so throughout the state regional planning commissions that are tasked with helping out with many different disciplines, but one of them includes transportation planning. And the town requested this as part of our annual work program to look at these areas for the feasibility of installing sidewalks. I'll stop there and pass it over to Revi.
Okay, I think everyone here knows me. I'm Revi. I'm the town planner, and just helping to, I guess, guide this project and help the transportation committee coordinate this project too. I think on this call there are a couple transportation committee members too. I know John's on the call and Chris Cole might be on the call too.
Hello.
You guys can just say hi.
I'm here, Chris Cole.
And John.
Great, thanks for being able to attend.
And Alan, I'm on the transportation committee as well.
Beautiful. And I also forgot to mention, we've contracted with Stantec for this study, who you can see their name at the bottom of all the slides. And Eric, you want to introduce yourself?
Yep. Hi, my name is Eric Alling. I will be the project manager for compiling the scoping study and pulling together the alternatives for each segment that we're going to look at.
And just a quick roles and responsibilities. If you were involved in the previous Bridge Street study, this is, it should be a much more straightforward study and a little less involvement, or I should say work in putting everything together and coming towards recommendations. At least that's usually the case when we're talking about sidewalks, but we will see how it unfolds. But in terms of what we're expecting from PAC members, just to attend and participate in the meetings, we have only 2 scheduled. So this is one of 2. The next time around we get together, we'll be talking about hopefully alternatives for you to react to. As is typical, review and comment on any materials that we send, and help us out in providing your insight and guidance to the process. And then updating people throughout the committee, throughout the community, if you're involved in various committees, neighbors, friends, anybody you think might be affected by the installation of the sidewalk in a certain area, and would want to know about it and be involved. And then ultimately indicating a preference for the direction that the town should pursue as this study wraps up. So I mentioned where we're at in the process. We're at the very beginning. This is where we're putting everything on the table, so to speak, and defining what the project is. And then from here, once the town has made a decision, that's when the planning would stop and you go towards funding and engineering and construction. So we're at the very beginning. This is the ground stages, if you will. And this is just a typical project process from VTrans, the Vermont Agency of Transportation. So we identify the problem, come up with a various set of alternatives to look at, and then eventually, hopefully, one will rise to the top that everyone, or at least most everyone, is in favor of. And this is our proposed timeline. In orange, you can see where we're at right now. Here we are in November already. You can believe that. And hopefully we will be wrapping up by April, May timeframe.
All right, I'll jump in here and go through the project areas. As some of you may be aware, there are 3 separate project areas that we're looking at within this one study. And don't worry about trying to squint to see where we are. This is just the overhead view to show the 3, but we have one up on Jericho Road, one on Bridge Street, and one on Huntington Road, and we'll look in a little bit closer at each one. The intent of this is not to be comprehensive existing conditions, it's just to sort of set up the project areas, show some of the existing conditions, and then allow for any feedback, any ideas or known issues or concerns with these areas. So starting with our project area number 1, hopefully everybody's zeroed in on where we are, but we have the entrance to the schools here, I-89. So we are looking at the westerly side of Jericho Road, up the hill and ending at Valley View Road. Jumping down to street view, there is existing sidewalk on Jericho Road that heads down the hill toward the village. Going up the hill away from the school, the shoulders are quite narrow. There are steep drop-offs just outside of the unpaved shoulder, which you can sort of see here, and it shows up even better in the next picture here. The speed limit is 25 near the school, and it goes up to 35 as you head up the hill away from the school. About 1,100 vehicles per day travel this segment, and the town's right-of-way is 49.5 feet or 3 rods. And we do have some overhead utilities to contend with, and you can maybe just see this one here, but they are along the side of the road that we're looking at. So any alternative we develop will have to take that into account along with these steep drop-offs. And so that sort of just sets the stage for this this one segment out of the 3. So I'd love for people to jump in with any comments, concerns. I'd love to hear if anybody is using or knows of anybody who's using it currently as a pedestrian or would use it if there were a facility, and any other issues related to pedestrian safety in this segment.
Are there going to be projections for potential use so that, we can do a cost analysis in terms of the benefit to the town, in terms of the number of pedestrians that are going to use a sidewalk based upon the cost to construct?
That is typically a tough number to come up with, where there aren't some existing, footpaths where people are already walking. We can do our best to estimate based on, the number of houses that would connect to this directly. But just, full disclosure, it's going to be tough to come up with an accurate number.
I think that's all that I would be looking for, is a catchment area of people, who live half a mile to 3/4 of a mile from the new proposed pedestrian infrastructure. That's, 3/4 of a mile is to get to a path. It's a transit thing to get to a stop. So I would think it would be applicable in terms of how far people would be willing to walk. It would just be interesting to know. I mean, this is ideally, I think, a connecting the school to the other side of the interstate where we don't have pedestrian pathway, but it would be nice to know the number of kids or adults who would potentially use it.
This is Robin Macy. I live in Southview, and there are definitely a number of people that walk from Southview down to town and back. So I think from our side, it would definitely get a lot of use.
This is Betsy Hardy. I live on the Jericho Road. I live in it's a gray house between Browns Court and Burnett Court. And I do walk up the hill to Southview and walk in Southview, just when I'm out for a walk to get exercise. And so I'm well aware of how a sidewalk would be very beneficial.
I'm curious, Robin, maybe this, does the Southview neighborhood have its own little listserv, or does everyone just use Front Porch Forum? Because it'd be really nice to, have it send a direct invitation to the people of Southview.
Yeah, we do have like an email group. If there's something you want me, I can give you the name of the person who manages it if you want.
Sure.
I'd have to email it later. I don't have it off the top of my head, but if you just let me know, send it to.
Maybe send it to Ravi. I'll happily write a invitation.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna put my email in the chat. If you could shoot me an email when you get the chance to sometime this week, that'd be great.
Sure.
Any other comments or questions related to this first area that we're looking at?
Ravi, how can
Oh, Gary has a comment from the conference room.
So are you looking also for design ideas, or just whether it's going to be used more?
No, this is an open forum here. So any
Okay.
thoughts on what might work well there, or what you'd like to see would be most welcome at this point.
Okay, so I think it's really important to have a green strip between the sidewalk and the road. We don't have that on some of Jericho Road, and we don't have my wife and I live right at the Red Bridge there, and we don't have it where people are coming from the Round Church side to get up onto the bridge. And at least there we see a lot of young kids kind of learning to ride with their nervous parents, hoping they don't drop into traffic. So particularly here where the traffic is going to be moving quite a bit faster than in the village, I think to have a little room for error if you go off the sidewalk is important.
Okay, thanks for that. Anything else on this segment? All right, if anybody thinks of anything, I'll leave some time at the very end where we can go through any of the three sections again. So segment 2 is along Bridge Street. We're looking at the east side here. Jason did allude to the other scoping study, so it may look like we're missing a segment here because existing sidewalk currently ends right at the northern side of the bank entrance. This was picked up as part of a different scoping study, so we will take any of those findings, incorporate them in with ours so that that study doesn't get lost or duplicated. But the limit we're looking at is from Jolena Court down to the green. There are currently sidewalks along the west side, which you can see here. Fairly narrow road with narrow shoulders, but it is nice and flat. There are some destinations within this project area, namely Volunteers Green, the Richmond Market, and the post office. Speed limit through here is 25 the whole way through, and there are about 5,700 vehicles per day that travel through this segment. Have another right-of-way width of 3 rods. And in the case of this segment, the overhead utilities are on the other side of the road, so we don't have to deal with them except for, I believe this is the only service pole on the side that we're looking at. And so same deal, open format here for comments and questions about, experiences people have had walking through this section and the need for sidewalk on both sides.
I would like to say that Other destinations include the library and the town offices at town center, as well as the post office at the town center. So, people need to access that. Currently, you have to, if you live on the east side of Bridge Street, or if you live on Main Street going east, you have to cross Bridge Street twice to get to any of these places. And Bridge Street is not a terribly friendly street to cross. So we think a sidewalk down the west side, down the east side would be very useful.
Yeah. I'll second that. And I do walk the area a lot and would love to have a sidewalk on the east side.
Gary has a,
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea with the level of development that's going to be coming to Jolena Court. That
Yeah.
I think a lot of use in the future just from that area.
And I think the same thing about having that green strip there, if possible, again, to put the sidewalk away from the road more. Because on the other side, it's like almost right there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not even room for the telephone poles.
Right.
Yeah, so just touching on that briefly, the desire, especially in terms of design, is always to have a grass strip. It's just, unfortunately, you end up in situations where either the town doesn't have the right of way, or it greatly increased costs to, have to add fill, or in some cases cut lead. So we would certainly want grass strip to be there, and that may end up being two of the alternatives. Would be one alternative with a grass strip and one without, that minimizes impacts.
Yeah. I
In
think,
this case, the town owns the cemetery and the library and the whole town center, so it alleviates some of that restriction.
That helps for sure.
Yeah.
as I remember it, the sort of the center line is really off skew there, and there's a lot of room to move the road or to build on the east side. And
That's good to know.
I vaguely remember past discussions where it was said we could actually add a green strip on the west side. If when we put some real sidewalks in there and still have room for the road and other stuff. But that goes back to a fuzzy part of the past. I may not remember that exactly correctly.
That's part of what we look up during the scoping study. So we'll figure out what we're dealing with, and we'll be able to estimate what the impacts to right of way will be.
So are we looking at another crosswalk then added at the river end?
Yes, there would have to be. We haven't figured out what side of the driveway makes more sense yet, but that will be investigated during the scoping process.
Do you have any thoughts on what side of the driveway the crosswalk should be or makes more sense to be?
I would think on the village side, because like if it's sort of the end of baseball or soccer time, a lot of people pull out quickly to the right when they're coming out of there from the park.
Mhm.
Oh, so we're talking about this side.
I would think so.
Okay.
I would think from a design perspective, you would want to make the crossing at the intersection of the other road,
Yeah, I was wondering that.
because you're then going from pedestrian sidewalk through a pedestrian crosswalk, and then you land safely on another pedestrian sidewalk,
Yeah.
as opposed to going into that parking lot, which between the pizza and the baseball, it can be a real zoo for pedestrians in that parking lot.
So maybe back here is what you're saying?
Yeah.
by Esplanade.
Yes, either side or the other.
Yeah.
There isn't a sidewalk on the village side anymore. There used to be one, but there isn't. That goes back on Esplanade. There isn't one that you would just deliver. People would end up on just the Bridge Street sidewalk.
Right.
So if you lined it up with that sidewalk that curves up through the pizza place into the park, I think that'd be the place to put it.
Although, is that a private sidewalk?
No, that's it.
That's a public one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Gary's right. That's a pretty good location because then it can funnel people from the park, as Gary said, right onto that sidewalk.
Maybe this would be helpful.
Do you clarify where that location was?
Yeah,
Right there.
yeah.
Right here.
No, other side.
Oh, over here. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense because it does line up with the other sidewalk here.
Yeah. And the lighting is fairly bad through that corridor, and it would be nice to have those lighted crossings as part of this project scope.
Meaning street lights or like rapid flashing beacons?
Rapid flashing beacons, just to
Okay.
alert motorists that somebody is in the crosswalk.
Those telephone lines are gorgeous.
It's accessibility, John.
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for this segment?
Looks good.
And
Just-
our final, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, just one other thought to look at the other pedestrian crossings that are in that corridor that would link the two sidewalks. I don't know how many they are, and some have those rapid flashing beacons and some don't, but it would be nice to get, an alternative with those included so we could have this section of the corridor with those safety devices.
Yeah, only one has the flashing light beacon. The
Yeah,
other one
that's what-
does not. Yeah.
And I know the town is doing them, I think one a year, but it would be nice to, if we get a grant for it to be all part of the project.
Mhm.
And I think, Jason, that's 100% money, is it? Or is it 80-20?
All right, I was trying to admit people at the same time. Can you clarify? what
The
you-
safety money, those beacons, the pedestrian beacons, is that 100% money or is that 80-20?
A safety
know?
project, if it was funded through safety
So-
funding would be 100%, but I don't think the same is true for RFPs.
Okay, thank you.
And I can't speak to how you funded the previous ones. I guess I'd be curious to know actually. I know you do have a few in town.
Well, we've been paying for those. We've just been paying those out of of our general funds.
Yeah.
There's just been this push to install them for public safety. But yeah, having a grant would be nice.
Yeah.
Okay, we can clarify whether or not that could be funded through a grant.
I can say that they also can be included in any VTrans bike ped or transportation alternative grant, but that would be an 80-20 match in that case if it was part of the overall project.
Actually, I was going to bring up that point, Eric, that transportation alternative program or bike ped program would fund these RFBs, but they would be part of the whole sidewalk project. They would not be separate funding for just RFBs.
Okay, again, if anybody thinks of anything else on that segment, we can certainly come back to it at the end. But for now, we'll move along to the third segment, which is along Huntington Road. And we are looking at the northerly side of the road between Stone Corral Brewery and the trailhead for Cross Vermont Trail. So there is existing sidewalk, as I'm sure everybody here knows, that rounds the corner onto Bridge Street and heads right into the heart of the village. There are narrow shoulders along Huntington Road, pretty steep drop-offs, similar to Jericho Road, although not as high. And it's a little bit hillier than Bridge Street. And the destinations within this project area include the Stone Corral Brewery and the trailhead for the Cross Vermont Trail. Speed limit here is 35 miles an hour, just over 3,400 vehicles per day. Like the other two segments, it has a 3-rod right-of-way. Like Jericho Road, but unlike Bridge Street, we do have the utilities to deal with on this side. And this picture kind of illustrates the steep drop-offs that we also have to take into account with any improvement that we look at. And finally here, we're looking at towards the trailhead of the Cross Vermont Trail. So again, we can open it up to any observations or comments or concerns for this segment.
So this would be a sidewalk, not like a rec path?
Unknown at this point.
Because there are a lot of bikers that, come off there and come into town. So I don't know what use would be better for that.
Yeah, if there's a way to fit a multi-use path in there, a multi-use path would definitely be useful. There is quite a bit of bike traffic as well as walkers going to the Cross Vermont Trail.
I was curious about that, so thank you for bringing that up. I thought this might be a little bit more attractive area for cyclists.
Yeah, if you want, Eric, one source is to look on Strava. You can see, on those heat maps.
Yep.
I've heard that's like very red. That
Okay,
section of the
yeah.
Cross Vermont Trail, because people, that's used quite a bit.
What, I assume there's various levels of recreation path. And again, I understand we've got, it's wide open right now, but would for something like this be like a path that allows travel in 2 directions by bikes and pedestrians?
Potentially, yes. Yeah, that would sort of fall into the standard 10-foot width of shared use path, which would give enough space for all types of users. And I can tell you, if VTrans were to fund a path project, they have a tough time supporting anything less than 10 feet, unless there was some other facility for cyclists. So if you could, have, say, a shoulder big enough for cyclists, they might let a municipality get away with an 8-foot path. But yeah, we'd be looking at a 10-foot path minimum to accommodate everybody.
Okay, but 10 foot is a standard. Okay,
Yeah,
that's really helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
I would look at the concept of extending the sidewalk to the last structure on the north side. Is that the north side? The north side of the road?
Yes.
Yep.
Right here.
Extend sidewalk to there. And then I'd have a conversation with the farmer who lives here, and that house, and their front yard may technically be in part of the right of way, but they don't have much of a front yard. And I really can't see taking 10 feet, which would probably be close to in their house on adjacent to the road. And if from the house that I identified, to the Cross Vermont Trail, which appears to be the destination of this path. Have conversations with the farmer about other alternatives than right in front of their house.
You're suggesting maybe something down here?
Potentially, yeah. You know, hug the right of way as close as you can. But, you know, obviously when you get to the house, there's also that vernal, you know, wetland that is delineated there. It was wet after the rainstorm. So that would probably need to be skirted around. I don't know what the options are, but I would definitely have a conversation
Is
as
that
to
this
where you
area
want.
right here?
Yeah,
Okay.
because it's not really safe to be on the other side of the road to when you get to the Vermont Cross Trail, because the sight lines are so tight that I understand why you're on the north side of the road, but I don't think it's practical to put a sidewalk or a 10-foot path in front of their house, regardless of whether the town owns the property.
Yeah, and even for me stopping off the road to take pictures, I didn't feel super comfortable because you're right, it is limited sight distance in a lot of areas along there.
Yeah, and from the first master plan that we did on the north side of town, pedestrian bicycle master plan, the town residents were overwhelming about anything that had to do with bicycles, that an off alignment path was preferred due to safety and wanting to bicycle with children. And so, you know, I would think that the same would hold true for this side of the road, which is why I mentioned maybe this particular corridor could be broken up into two pieces, extending that sidewalk, but then looking for that off alignment path, because people really are trying to get from an existing trail onto pedestrian infrastructure. Thank you.
It's actually that from a design standpoint, that's a lot cleaner too. We don't have to worry about that steep drop off. It would fit in, frankly, better through the field if it was possible. So that's great comment. Thank you.
Eric, I was wondering if you could speak about material, if it should be paved or could be gravel.
Yeah, so both have maintenance. I think paved is just the way to go. I mean, yes, it will have to be resurfaced, you know, every 10 or 15 years, depending. But if it's gravel, then it's going to be less intense, but more frequent maintenance to keep it, you know, free of anything over a half an inch differential is considered a trip hazard. And since this is a public path, it would be subject to any ProWag or ADA regulations. So that would be a challenge, keeping a gravel path in that kind of shape.
Do floodplain regulations have a difference between pavement and gravel path?
I believe they're both considered impervious, but I can verify that. But yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, because this, like in a good springtime flood, you know, this entire property floods up until that dark green strip you see and just around the house. Doesn't
Right here,
flood, but
yeah.
But everything else can be underwater, depending upon the amount of water we get.
And it's typical, like you're saying, on a average year, it does flood.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
This field floods regularly. It's just how far up close to the road does it flood?
Gotcha. Challenging location for sure.
Yeah. The last time that field was really heavily flooded was I guess 2 years ago, yesterday or whenever, the Halloween flood of 2019.
Any other thoughts or comments on this segment?
No, just it's good to get people, hopefully get people off the road. It's a really
Yeah.
tight area and people do tend to come fast down the hill.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I live around the corner from there, just off of Bridge Street, and I rarely go in that direction because it's just not a comfortable place to explore. I much prefer to walk all over Gene and Gary's place because of that.
It sounds like.
I was just going to say those S curves are kind of dangerous for cyclists and drivers of automobiles, because people will come around the corner in your lane because they're passing a cyclist on a curve. People are in too much of a rush. They don't wait to see what's coming. And I've encountered other vehicles coming head on. So it's a dangerous, those two S curves are kind of dangerous when you introduce pedestrians and cyclists and cars all together, because the sight lines are really tight.
Yeah, agreed. I was just curious, it sounds like there's general consensus for a path. I just wanted to entertain the notion of whether or not we should consider a sidewalk going all the way on this section. Is anyone interested in that?
Or maybe a combination of a sidewalk and a widened shoulder, but that would be single direction travel for cyclists, because I don't think we could really do it on both sides.
Right.
So yeah, just trying to think outside the box, some sort of a two-way cycle track, but I don't think this is the area for that.
Yeah, I just wanted to put something out there for anybody to react to. And it's totally okay if you don't like the idea.
As long as we can get people off the road, either one is fine.
All right. Has anybody thought of anything from one of the previous two segments that we should go back and talk about?
I was just thinking at the entrance to Southview on the Jericho Road one. There is where the, just partway up from the interstate where there's the green, that's gone now, but it's not the water tower. It's now a parking lot. We had looked at that as a trails committee as a potential parking area for access to trails, and it was decided that there weren't safe sight lines to drive out of there, but potentially a path could go off into Southview through there so that you don't have to access it where the cars access Southview, sort of cut off that the intersection part of it.
That sounds like a good idea to me, because I know when I'm walking, from my home on Jericho Road up to Southview, that's kind of the most dangerous part of my walk, I think, is when I first turn there onto Southview, and there's that sharp curve there where,
Right in this area.
if I'm walking, I've already gone up into Southview and I'm on my way back home again, that curve as I'm approaching Jericho Road, yeah, right in there.
Yep.
If a car is coming, the same direction I'm walking, or coming the other way, it's just, I try to walk facing traffic, but on that curve, I usually don't walk facing traffic. It's just a dangerous curve.
All right. Anything else? Well, thank you. That was great feedback that we'll be able to use going forward. And in terms of what comes next, Jason covered a little bit of this in the timeline slide, but we're going to take the ideas and concerns we got here tonight, and we will start looking at those to develop solutions, and these will ultimately turn into alternatives, which will be refined through meetings with the project team, and we'll end up with ideally 2 alternatives minimum per segment, and then we can refine those and bring them back sometime in the spring. And there'll be another public meeting, and it would be great to have everybody back there again to comment on what we have developed. And yeah, so it would be great to have everybody back at that point. So we don't have anything else tonight, but we do have a project website that is, you can see linked here. You can get to it from the RPC's website. We also have some contact information for Jason and myself. If anybody thinks of something that they forgot during this meeting or wants to add anything, please feel free to reach out to us. Any comments we receive can be incorporated with any other comments that we receive and included in the report. So thank you very much for having us and for the feedback tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Cool, thank you.